found AHO Radio. We're authentic human outliers coming together to help heal the fear of being authentic. To bring back genuine human conversation. No hype, no sensationalism, just honest talk about the critical issues affecting society, affecting humankind. And now, here are the hosts of AHO Radio, John Krotec and Bill Protzmann. Hey, John, how's things today?
Pretty good, I think. I think that we're hanging in there. We're getting ready to enter 8th week of the lockdown for COVID-19 pandemic, and I'm super excited to talk about what we're going to talk about today, which is fear and things sacred. And I think it's a good time to discuss that.
Oh, definitely. I'm kind of old school here. I grew up reading the King James Version, you guys, so that's me. But the word fear in King James means to have awesome respect, in addition to being scared, terrified. So it's like one of those words where it has a double meaning. And it's such a cool double meaning for right now, because not only am I terrified a lot of the time, but I have this awesome respect for the situation we're in the world. It's like both at the same time are true. It's like a one-word paradox, man.
Well, it's actually, it's a one-word paradox. It's a double-edged sword. If you have too much fear, you vacillate, you create all this fear, all this anxiety, and all this worry, and then you don't do anything. You freeze. Like the deer caught in the headlight. That's why a lot of them get hit, because they freeze. And then as a human being, when you're fearful, oh my gosh, history is rife with easy manipulation, easy to control, easy to steer you the way certain power and authority figures want you to go. And so, that's the one side of it. And then, too little fear, and you can become impulsive and impetuous and, enter into high risk behavior without thinking. And, sometimes, it could be as bad as costing you your life, but, so you have to find that balance.
I have this feeling that we're not very skillful with fear. It's sort of one of those things that, well, it's scary. I mean, sorry to be so circular about this, but I mean, fear is one of those things that you have to deal well with. And if you have any practice dealing well with fear, it can be overwhelming, and it can spawn a whole lot of additional spinning, let's just call it spinning in your headspace, if you don't have a good handle on it. So how do you get a handle on fear? I mean, it's one of those things where practicing fear is, that's difficult, unless you've been to boot camp or whatever, where they purposely put you through a regimen that's going to acquaint you closely with fear and with your own responses to fear. That's what you want practice on. You want to practice how you respond to fear.
Yeah, well, you talk about the paradox. Of course, I looked it up, and one of the biggest fears of every single human being is the fear of dying.
Sure. Yeah.
And so it's something always in the back of your mind. And, even with this COVID, am I going to get it? Am I going to give it to somebody? Do I know somebody that's going to die? And, that underlying specter of death is always there on our shoulder. And so I think Carlos Castaneda in the Journey to Ixtlan way back in the day talked about the dance and the walk of a warrior. And, and there's a certain way that you walk on the earth, on the pads of your feet, your toes. And if you ever felt like that you were going to die close to death, and there's a chapter in there, I'm not going to give it away, but he says, turn around and talk to death and have a dance with death. And the dance with death is a spiritual or a metaphor for, is it your time to go? Have that conversation with death. Put death in a figure that you can talk to make it more real. And so fear becomes real, and then you can deal with it. But the paradox, the fear of dying, the fear of what about the fear of living?
Especially right now, yeah.
Get out there and live, and the fear of success, and the other side of that's the fear of failure, and fear. And I got the feeling these last couple of weeks, just watching the various news outlets, that's all they were doing was spawning fear. No wonder people are showing up at the Capitals with machine guns.
Oh yeah.
Anyhow, that's the song by Bob Dylan, you still got to serve somebody. You were saying something about the solution. And this is just my own personal opinion. You know what they say about opinions. Everybody's got one. Some are smellier than others. You know, we know that joke. But I think that there's got to be our conversation today is sacred and fear. I think that part of the recipe or part of the solution to be able to handle our fears is to have some type of spiritual or sacred base. And if you listen to Bob Dylan's song, the lyrics are awesome. All these different professions that you can have. But at the end of the day, you still have to serve somebody. And the question that you ask, are you going to serve the Lord, which is God or the omnipotent power of the universe, or you're going to serve the baser, the devil? And so here's a song that I didn't really get it, 30 years ago when I first heard it, but now at 60, it makes so much more sense. Do whatever you want to do in your life, but who are you going to fear? You're going to fear something greater than you? Well, they're both greater than you, but are you going to serve the dark side? Or are you going to serve the light? And I think that, the sacredness of our life, and I've heard so many people talking about it lately, that we have lost something in the modern techno society, the rituals of the past that used to have a reverence for the earth. And, we've lost some of that. And people seem to think that all these techno tools are going to solve all of the fears of society, and they're not. They're just going to add to them. We have to be vulnerable and we have to be real.
The thing that you talk about with the sacred is interesting to me. I've done a lot of research and reading over the course of my life about consciousness and the spiritual, and the numinous, I guess is what they call it. And I've become, as a musician, with a responsibility for unpacking big emotions. Fear is one of those big emotions that's in music, along with anger and sadness and joy. They're all there. And to be able to convincingly convey fear in music is difficult, because to be a musician, you don't just repeat notes. If you're playing a John Williams score, for example, to Star Wars, and you're a violin player in the orchestra, you're not just repeating the notes. You're repeating the notes with feeling. And if the feeling is fear, you've got to be good at finding the emotional content of the music you're playing. And if that means fear, you've got to bring that fear to the music. So how do you do that? How do you do that? You do it with practice, right? And fear, because it's so scary to all of us. I mean, for heaven's sakes, fear has replaced sex as the thing that sells now. If you're in the media and you can sell something with fear, you're going to have more viewers than the people who don't. Which, okay, truth be told, so we're facing that head on right here on AHO Radio. But you've got to have some familiarity with this thing. And the moment that you get that familiarity, or you start to get that familiarity, is when it starts to dial back its hold on you. And it starts to transition, if you will, from the terror aspect of fear to the respect aspect of fear. It's like those Indians you're talking about doing the ceremonial dances, and the intention that you bring, the mindfulness you bring to walking on the earth itself. That's a respect thing. But that respect is that other aspect of fear. It's the transformation of fear from terror to honor, in a way. And when you do that is when you approach the sacred, when you approach the spiritual. I mean, think about the Catholic Mass. I'm not Catholic, but I love the Mass because of its ceremonial and awe-inspiring ability. Now, if it was done that way, you'd get that. In Latin, in a cathedral, you'd have that experience of entering the womb of God and hearing the mystic chants and seeing the smoke and smelling the incense and ultimately taking communion. This is a mystic event, and it's meant to be awe-inspiring. And if you've never seen it before, it could be terrifying too. I mean, this ritual is huge. And after you begin to understand it and you begin to get what's going on, you then begin to have this healthy respect for that ritual. Just like the violinist playing a scary piece of music, you're bringing your understanding of what fear is to either the communion itself, the sacred, the sacred space, the sacristy. This is the place. This is what we call this place, because it is the highest altar, basically, of fear, of fear in a respect sense. It's the same kind of understanding the violinist brings to playing the fear music, and that transition, that transformation, is the invitation that we're getting right now. Instead of being scared to death, being scared to life.
Well, when you talk about the concept of fear, when I was going through some of my therapy to deal with my own issues, with the head injury, fear was identified as one of the thoughts or feelings. And, you talk about the work, the proverbial word work, and it does take work to work through these thoughts and feelings. And when you start to identify fear as just a thought or a feeling, or maybe sometimes an emotion, I'm not sure, but, you start to realize that it's not really real in a sense of something physical. It's real in a sense of something subconscious or conscious. And everybody's heard Winston Churchill's famous World War II quote. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. And can you imagine? So I thought, well, who's he saying this to? What's the audience? Well, you've got these people that in London that are trying to go about their daily business. It's a world war going on last time they checked. And then the nightly bombings by the Germans, it just must have just been an incredible, and history is full of stuff like that, but the audience. And so when you take that comment or that quote on face, it's just a word. It's a word that has big meaning. But when you place it in its context, of course, if you're walking down the trail in the Appalachian here in North Carolina and you see a brown bear, or a black bear, you're gonna haul butt. You're gonna just skedaddle. And so there's a time and a place where fear, in a healthy dose of it, can be good. But most of the times, I don't know how I'm gonna die. How would I know that? So what am I gonna do? Sit around all day long and worry about it? But I do know that to alleviate that fear, it's nice to have something sacred to lean on.
Oh, sure.
And because it seems all the more powerful, when you read the stories, like I was raised Catholic like you, but when you read all the ancient stories of the sacred and gods and goddesses, they always had an amazing, a consistent theme where they always overcame the bad stuff of life, But you and I even talked about the devils and the demons. And there was even a place for those. We know the story of the gargoyles. There are these ugly winged creatures that turn to stone during the day, but at night they protect the building or the village from evil, even though they look evil. So, a lot of it's perceptual, but there's a meaning there that not everything that we see is something to be feared.
There's support for that. A minister that we both love, I won't mention his name right now, we'll put it in the show notes, did a whole sermon on Satan. And he came at it from a Jewish perspective, where instead of being like a fallen angel, which the Bible says that Satan is, in the Jewish tradition, Satan is more of God's employee. He's there as an adversary to help us understand the differences between left and right and wrong, this and that. So his function is there as more of an annoyance to get us thinking and help us make good choices versus somebody who is, responsible for all of the lost souls that fall into hell. Uh, it's a different way of looking at adversity and the adversary. Instead of being this scary thing that, oh my God, this is going to ruin me, and not having a way to dig into that. When you think of fear as your adversary, as something that's there to help you make a better choice, that changes the nature of the conversation, because that opens up the possibility that you can make that better choice based on your own understanding, whatever that understanding might be. If you're a consciousness kind of person, you might evaluate it logically and choose this versus that. If you're invested in the sacred, if you have a religious sense about you or belief system that opens you to the sacred, you might say, okay, well, here's the nature of one thing that I could do. Here's the nature of the other thing that I could do. What's the best practice right now? What's the best choice? And evaluate it that way. And if you're in that sacred space, you might be pulled toward your understanding of God and choose something that's, say, loving versus hateful. So that idea of an adversary is one that opens the door on fear. Instead of keeping you locked behind it, it gives you a way to at least look out, peek out, and take a look and say, okay, I'm pretty scared right now, so I could choose this or I could choose that. Which is the choice that's best? Um, which is the heart space that's best? You can make a gut level feeling on that too. So that's a way of befriending fear. It's kind of a weird thing to say, but to to practice fear that way, that's fear with options. It's
Well,
fear with a
in
dead
therapy,
sentence.
yeah, I was told to treat fear like a companion, but you're reminding me of a scene in a movie. If you haven't seen Animal House, there's a part in there where they've been to a fraternity party, and a young lady she imbibed a little bit too much and passed out. And the scene, without going into too much detail, is he's got this lovely woman right there back in his dorm room, and a little devil of himself pops up, and the little devil of himself as an angel pops up, and they engage in this conversation, right, about what to do to this woman and the condition that she's in. And but anyhow, he makes the choice to deliver her back to her parents' house in a shopping cart because he found out, I guess, she was a high school girl at a college fraternity or something. But the point is that that sacred side of your intuition, the conscious, or whatever you want to call it, the consciousness, and to be able to make a decision that he was fearful. He's got this drunk girl in his room. He didn't know what to do, and his conscience was trying to tell him what to do on both sides of the fence, and he made a choice that was good for him. And it's the same as fear. Fear, embrace it. We used to say in the military, embrace the suck. What we're doing right now is not good, but if we don't dig this foxhole and an incoming shell comes in, we could die. So embrace the bad part of that thought and feeling, and then just get on with it.
So, do you think it's
Yeah.
responsible, John, to scare people into what you want them to do?
Um, that's a whole other story. I don't think we should be scaring anybody. I think that there should be a healthy dose of education going on, but I think that when you scare the masses, like I said, you end up with, I'll put it to you this way: what's going on in Michigan? And of course, this is going to date the show later on, but we're talking about fear. All those people up in Michigan, there's a perception, and everybody can have their opinion, that the governor of Michigan has overstepped their bounds. Okay. As you can't buy a gallon of paint or a flour, but you can go to the bar and get a drink, your bottle, whatever. Let's not get into the details, but the fear of people, worried about their livelihoods, and now, shoot, we can't even do the simple things that we take for granted, showing up with guns. There's an instance where I believe that leadership has created fear in people. And if people start thinking that they can't do the simple things in life, why can I go get to a liquor store and pick up a bottle, but I can't go to church? That's kind of an interesting juxtaposition to put your constituents in. And the last thing I would want as a governor of the state that I was leading would be to have citizens showing up at the courthouse with machine guns. So I would say that she created fear, massive amounts of fear, because it wasn't commonsensical to do the things that she did. That's my opinion. Somebody else might think entirely different. But when guns start showing up at courthouses in America, there's a problem. There's something not right going on. And it's a direct reflection of leadership. So to answer your question, sorry to take so long, but I don't think it's responsible to create fear in people. I don't. And especially if you're a political leader, you create fear. Those people that you create fear in could be the ones that oust you. And even though it's the 21st century, things happen. Marie Antoinette thought she was above it all, didn't she? And heaven forbid, and I'm not advocating violence, but as a political leader, you need to be careful with how you instill or not instill fear in the people that you have authority over.
Well, let's say the same thing for the media, because one of the things that resonates for me throughout my life, and I'm not a big news hound. I didn't have TV growing up, but I knew Walter Cronkite's voice,
Yeah.
and I trusted that voice, right? And so when the media today basically takes the stand that we have to be sensational to sell our news versus all the other news channels that are out there. We have to be sensational. What are they going to find? They're going to find the scariest story they can. They're going to lead with the thing that has the biggest emotional pop in the audience. And more that's becoming fear, except that we're becoming tone deaf. And what I'm looking for right now is the media, that whoever the media organization is, that's going to take that next step and say, you know what, people, enough with fear already. Everybody else is doing fear. We're going to differentiate ourselves in the market by doing something else. We're going to disrupt this market of overarching fear, and we're going to do something else that gets us to that next place. The something else is what I'm curious about.
Well, check out the goodnewsnetwork.com.
Oh yeah, and I know they're out
Yeah.
there, right? So
No, so I'm just
yeah,
saying that that's yes. I mean, you have to. To go from the government to media, media has an extraordinary responsibility to report the news. And I'm like you. I can remember when news was news, and you could trust them. And I don't think that it's Trump that's created this. The fake news genre of belief systems out there. I think the media has systematically lost their credibility long before our current president
oh sure,
ever came.
they haven't been rigorous in a long time.
Long time. And then even some stalwart, like the New York Times that used to be revered. I don't think they're revered anymore. I think that a lot of what they write is fear mongering and political stuff. And again,
Because it
lost,
sells, right?
because it sells. And
I want to read that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, so there you go. I to answer your question, it's irresponsible for what these mass media outlets are doing. And of course, educate people, but be an advocate for real news and not an advocate for sensationalism and money making.
There was a time where the government and the media were sort of in a partnership. The government could turn to the media and say, hey, we need to get this word out because people need to know this. And the media would take that ball and run with it, with credibility and with the full support of the government behind them. I don't think we're at that place anymore. Maybe that became on, well, I don't know, before Watergate, but it seems like Watergate was the moment at which the media and the government parted ways and just said, nope, we're going to report on this even if it means that our government is going to collapse. And that's brave. I admit that's brave, but that's morphed into whatever we can put out there that is most sensational. It's like National Enquirer stuff at the supermarket. Whatever we can find.
Well, it's progressed.
Most readers.
It's progressed to a level of hatred.
Yeah.
And hatred is just an extension of fear. And once you get to the hatred part, it doesn't matter what the person you're against even says or does.
Yeah. Then it's gone. You're blind.
You're blinded by your fear. You're blinded by your, who really believes that the president of the United States, and I don't want this to be a political show, is like Adolf Hitler? I don't believe that. I think that's a horrible, horrible, and I hear that a lot. And it's like, wow, do you know anything about World War II or what really happened? And anyhow, I don't want to get this to be a diatribe about politics, but no, people in certain places where they have positions to influence or the power to influence need to be very careful how they wield that responsibility, because you can create a bad situation real quick. And I don't think it's a good situation, although I'm a Second Amendment rights guy. I own firearms, but I think you're setting a dangerous precedent if you lead to put fear in your constituents where they're showing up with firearms.
So let's talk about the responsibility that those of us who are constituents, which is most of us, have here, because so we got fear. It's sitting there on our shoulder. It's bugging the hell out of us. It's terrifying. How do we, as responsible people, deal with that? And I know that the answer is a lot more complicated than, well, we ignore the fear and magical thinking is not what we're talking about here, people. We have to engage this. We can't just ignore it and hope it goes away. We can't pray it away. We can't pretend it doesn't exist. That's not responsible. Our responsibility needs to be for engagement, to man up or woman up or whatever, to get into it and say, fear that I don't like. What is it that I need to know? What are you offering me here? What is my responsibility to take this scary stuff that you're throwing my way and transform that in a way that works for good? How do we do that? That's where it really comes home, you know?
Well, it's a big question. It's a lot to do, but we're doing it right now with social commentary.
Yep.
We're sitting down, we're having a discussion. It would be great if we had one or two other people to get an insider view from their viewpoint. But it's great that we're opening this up. And all you can really do is think. Remember that? My wife gets mad at me sometimes, we call it gray matter. When are we going to start using this gray matter? And rather than go strictly off of emotion and passion, maybe we should go off of consciousness, when something comes our way. And, I can't tell you how many times I flew to South America back in the day. They got diseases rampant down there. I climbing high altitude mountains, taking massive amounts of gear, flying in a plane, going to a foreign country, sometimes going in dangerous areas because of the political climate, climbing a massive mountain, coming back down, never even considering that the raw sewage could kill me, in some of these cities, and then coming back and never thought about being scared once. How does a person operate like that? So I just think it comes with, I knew the countries I was going to. I would always hire a local guide service who knew the political situation in the areas to go. I studied the mountains ad nauseum. I prepared myself and educated myself. And I think it goes to your question, rather than get all rambunctious and all up in sensationalism and fear by a story, do the research. I used to tell my wife, and I used to be the same way. I'm not going to be a hypocrite here. Holy cow, I'm pissed at that. I'm scared at that. That scares the daylights out of me. And then 3 days later, they're off to a new story. And that one kind of disappears. And when you do the education about it and you look into it deeper, it wasn't nearly what they said it was going to be.
You're absolutely right. As a libertarian, I don't have a major party to vote for, but to vote responsibly, it means that I have to look at both sides, both left and right, and try to thoroughly understand where they're coming from. And that's difficult. I mean, let's face it, that political discourse in America is not real erudite anymore. But it forces you, when you take that position in the middle, to look at the alternatives a little bit more closely. You don't
Start
just
locally.
discount
Yeah.
all of them, right? You have to dig in and really do some learning. You got to do some learning, like you did on the trips to South America. You hire experts. You do your homework. You get prepared so that when the fear moment comes, it's something that you haven't planned for. Yes, because that's the stuff that scares us, but everything else is pretty well taken care of so that you can focus on that fear moment, whatever it is, hanging off the edge of a mountain, right? What am I going to do? Um, I mean, that's the challenge. That's the juice, right? That's the stuff you live for. And finding that these days, when the overwhelm is so huge, it's a little bit more difficult to think for yourself in the middle of a pandemic. But I think people are doing it, and I'm encouraged to see people who are taking a strong position, even though I don't like seeing, gun-toting people in front of a courthouse. I'm encouraged when people take a strong position because that gives us something to bounce off of. That's not just the fear, right? So instead of talking about whether or not coronavirus is going to kill me, we can talk about what are our responsibilities during this pandemic. Are they like these people standing on the steps of the courthouse with guns? Are they like these people cowering at home? What's our choice? How do we choose responsibly and navigate through this instead of just being locked up by it? So yeah, it's not the response I want. And oftentimes, you know how this is in America. It's the fringes that guide the conversation. The people way out on the way outside the third standard deviation. They're the ones who are guiding the conversation because they're loudest. But inside, back in the main line here, even when it comes to being outliers, I don't feel like I'm that much of an outlier when I think about American political discourse or our response to the pandemic or what's happening in the world. I think there's enough information starting to hit now, John, so that we can say, oh, well, it looks like this. And I thought it was going to be like that. And I was scared of that other thing. But now I have this understanding of what it might be that I can work with that, right? I can take a step forward a little bit. I can open the envelope just a tiny bit and maybe learn something. I think that's the propulsion that we're looking for in fear. And not so much as something that immobilizes us, but something that pushes us toward a more responsible action, thought, whatever it is. They were talking about thoughts, and yeah, it does start there. I think changing your mind is the invitation in coronavirus. What are you going to change your mind to? The unknown? We don't know, but
Well, but you
get there.
said it, responsibility. We're all responsible for ourselves. Nobody's going to make me do anything that I don't want to do.
Oh, I bet I could. You know what? I'll take that challenge. Give me a
No,
few days to
no,
think about it.
but being responsible, it boils down to personal responsibility, and the choices that you have that you've talked about. I recall, even all the preparation that I did I was on a very high mountain in Argentina, and it was one of the acclimatization days where we're acclimatizing to high altitude. And I remember somebody screaming, it was probably 200 yards away, rock. And rock is like, when you hear the word rock, you freeze in place and you look around to identify the threat.
Duck and cover.
So I looked up and I saw a boulder coming down the ridge line. It would bounce and it would hit and it would bounce and it would go up. It was about the size of a Volkswagen van. Okay, so if
Whoa.
it hits you, you're dead.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at it, and I'm frozen on this ridge line. I'm looking for an escape route, and I just stood there. And I said, you know what? If it's my time, it's my time. That boulder doesn't matter if I crouch here, I'm gone. That boulder hit about 75 feet in front of me, bounced up, went over my head, and bounced about 35 feet behind me. But when it bounced up, it bounced really high. And then it goes down, and I followed it, and it didn't hit anybody. I thought to myself, holy cow. And you know what? I came to the grips that if it was my time to go, it was my time to go. That point in time, and I knew I had insurance, and I knew that certainly a lot of people would grieve, and I don't really want to die, but I had prepared myself mentally for that in the event. So if you prepare yourself and you live in the moment, whatever happens to you, you're going to be okay. Like you said, if always thinking the worst about things is going to keep you fearful. And if you think that way, and you said mindset, my mindset hasn't always been this way. I mean, I'm fearful of things, and but I tend to always look at the world through rose-colored glasses. That no matter what happens, it's not going to be as bad as it probably could be. So I think that's just a personal choice that I make. And just go out to your local hardware store or grocery store now and look at the fear out there. I see people driving around with masks inside of their cars, and we live kind of out in the country. We used to live out in the country, but where the incidents of probably catching this thing are next to none, but people are driving around in their cars with masks on. And I wrote a poem about that, and I thought to myself, well, maybe they're doctors, maybe they're coming from but it was kind of a comical, but it hit home. How much fear? How far are we going to go with fear?
You
And
know
and
that
and
you bring up an interesting point because California masks are mandatory outdoors now, and I've looked at this in two different ways. First of all, I don't like the government telling me what to do, so that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is I'm putting on a mask to tell you that I care about your safety, regardless of whether or not that's true or not. Um, I'm doing this as a gesture of goodwill to you. I don't want you to catch anything that I might be, carrying. And
so let's say you get
and
tested and you don't have it. You
yeah,
still
and
going to wear the mask?
probably so, because in that case, it's like, okay, I'm still going to show people that I want that I'm going to offer that respect. You know, I'm not concerned about whether or not I have it or whether or not I'm going to give it, but I'm going to continue to offer respect. And if the governor says we got to do that, well, fine. What the heck? I choose to experience that as respect instead of being coerced into doing something I don't want to do. That's my choice. And I feel better about that than going out there and openly defying it, and not wearing a mask and all that kind of stuff. I mean, and there's, there's, it's valid both ways. It's valid both ways. I want to be sure people understand that. I have great respect for people who choose to go out without masks, and I have great respect for people who choose to do. And I've chosen to go with those who do because I care about what other people's perception is, and I want to offer them that respect. Does that make any sense?
Well, it does, and that's your choice, and kudos to you. And on Florida, we don't have such an order.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to say the times that I've been out, and think about Florida, where the average median age is elderly, mostly retirees who are in that age that could just be, they're at risk.
Yeah.
And I would say that it's about half and half. Half the people I see out are wearing masks, half of them aren't. I haven't worn a mask, but I haven't been out that much. And when I go, I keep my distance, I do my stuff, and I leave. But look at the death rate in Florida. I think we're one of the best. Any death is a bad one, but look how low that they've managed to maintain the deaths in a state that's full of elderly people that are high risk people if they get it, without a mask order. So,
yeah.
How does that work? And I've talked to several people who thought they've even had this thing, who thought they had it back in January.
Yep.
I think I had that. I had this weird cold or this weird flu-like thing. I never, I was hacking and coughing for days, and my temperature was up there. This may have been here without us even knowing it.
Yeah, most likely.
But anyhow, it comes down to personal responsibility. I think that if I'm going to be in a real tight quarter, I probably would opt to wear the mask. But I've been out and about. I haven't been that close to people, and there's no such order here. So if there was an order to do it, I'd wear it. But there's no such order, so it's freedom of choice. And I'm not sick. I don't think I've got it, and Florida's done fairly well. So I think, again, all the big things we're talking about is, choice and making the right decision for you. And it's nice to have a social responsible component to that. But when you get right down to it, how responsible are we for everybody else?
Now, this is the golden question.
That's the response. Yeah, that's the golden question. How responsible am I? Remember back in the AIDS, when AIDS was like huge,
yeah,
and they didn't really understand it. And, there were some people that actually had it that knew they had it and were out there infecting other people, and gosh, giving people a death wish. I don't know. That's the proverbial question, how responsible am I for others?
This is, this is a whole different show right now.
For sure.
I've been asking that question because I'm really curious right now what thought leaders and ministers and people who are like in positions of influence in some way are thinking about that question. Because the question is, in this moment, do I help others come along, or do I continue to advance what I do to a place where it becomes the example for others? And the answers to that question are so varied right now, because there are people who are deeply invested in making sure that everyone that they can help receives some kind of help. And what a noble endeavor. And then there are people who are deeply invested in their own growth to a place where they can help other people achieve something more, but where they couldn't help those people if they stopped their own growth. Imagine Einstein being told, okay, we're sorry, Albert, but this quarter you're going to have to teach algebra. What a waste. But if there are people that needed to learn algebra and it was necessary for the benefit of everybody else, that would be an interesting choice for Dr. Einstein to have to make. It's like, well, do I do this because it helps more people and more people need this help? Or do I continue to work on relativity because that's the future? How do you choose in that place?
It comes down to personal choice again. I was talking to a doctor friend of mine about COVID. And again, there's different data out there, and what he was saying was that if you keep social distancing and you wash your hands continually and you keep them out of your face, and if you have to cough or sneeze and you put it in, that the chances of you actually getting this are like next to nothing.
Yeah, it's pretty minimal if you do the right, if you take care of yourself like a responsible person should do. Hello, people.
Yeah, and well, what I think is really taking place is, I think it's exposed. Like I said, this show has morphed into something more, but it's exposed the fallibility of globalism, I think. And, what was China's responsibility to the world when they knew it was out there? I mean, come on. Everybody knows it came from Wuhan. They had those strains. And then I've even heard that the University of Texas was sharing information, about research on those types of viruses. So, what's going on here? What is the real story? And again, Then again, you could just look at it, buy locally, stay locally, don't look at the bigger picture, take care of your own, be responsible for yourself. And you saying there is the setting the example, if you're responsible for yourself, then I think you've pretty much answered the question.
Well, yeah,
You're,
we do have to be that responsible. I mean, if you're the leader of a family, how do you guide your family through this process right now? What do you do? I mean, I don't know the answers. I'm just asking these questions to
no,
see
no,
if
that's
they're
rhetorical
rhetorical.
for sure.
You know,
I think
how
it's
do you
different
do
for
that?
everybody.
I mean, if you're on your own right now, if you're isolated by yourself in quarantine, how do you respond in that situation? I mean, we haven't been pulled in this direction as people before. This is a unique opportunity to see how we operate in this situation, and we're probably going to make it through without a lot of difficulty. But in the middle of it, it sure feels terrible.
Well, I'm gonna take the federal guidelines, maintain social distancing, not be in groups of 10 or more people. Like I said, if I'm in a tight quarter, I'll wear a mask. My wife and I, neither one of us, we've got them, but she has really been out a lot less than I have been. And when we go somewhere, she stays in the car. So, we've worked it out. If somebody gets sick, I'd rather it be me, but so I think that has a lot to do with it. Then for me personally, the show Fear and Sacred, I practice self-care. That's meditation and prayer, and I have my own beliefs. I'm not here to castigate people for their beliefs or try to convince anybody of anything. I know what my beliefs are, and so there's a certain sacred side to my behavior. And so, like one book I wanted to share is Japanese death poems.
Oh yeah,
It's a,
that's a good
it's
one.
a, it's Zen monks and haiku poets who wrote these really simple poems, but complex in theory on their deathbeds. And so to me, the book is about how people on the very verge of their own deaths handled it and how remarkable they were and how creative they were at their last hours. And so I think that's a good book that I would recommend. And then two other books that I've read recently are All Things Shining
Yeah.
by Hubert Dreyfuss and Sean Kelly. That particular book talks about gods and goddesses and religious and traditions and how we became secular, and how you still go to some of these ancient cultures or the descendants of these ancient cultures. I've been to Amazonia and I've seen some of these ceremonies, and there's Aborigines in Australia the same way. Some of the tribes in Africa, they're very, very, very spiritual. And so they don't really offer any. I'm not going to give away the book. It's a good book worth reading. And then another one, if you're Christian oriented or Christian minded, a book that I've liked, it's called Making a Difference by R.C. Sproul. It's Sproul. I know that we'll add those to the show notes, but that kind of book gives various outline on how you can be spiritual or religious. It's a word people throw around, but it's how you can be spiritual in a secular age. We've talked about that. I know, Bill, you and I have talked about stuff like that and these technological distractions that take us away from some of those beliefs. And I think one reason why we're doing the show, AHO Radio, because people have this fear of authenticity. And I think that that's what these technical gadgets and tools and pastimes do, is they pull us away, make us less vulnerable, and they pull us away with this fear of authenticity, and we can just concentrate on these things that the value is personal, without passing judgment.
Yeah.
I think that when
Well
you have a
said.
spiritual base, it leaves you the opportunity for some growth and to get back to more meaningful things in your life.
Yes, that's it. See, that's it. Getting back to the stuff that really matters. I'm professionally, I did tech support for years, and I've become very frustrated when I'm talking to somebody who's supposed to be offering me technical support and literally can't. I was in a chat for 5 hours the other day on some piece of equipment that I couldn't get to work. But I've become very patient with myself. And that's new for me. I can put it down. I can let it go and focus on something else for a while. And I used to be this, I was dogged. I was going to fix it. Whatever it was, I was going to get it fixed, by the end of the day or by whatever. So I've given myself a break, and I think maybe that's the answer here to fear, is to give yourself a break. And the way you do that is to open to something that's more meaningful than the fear. The bigger meaning could be in something that's sacred for you. It could be in something that has to do with your family. Just dinner together is a sacred event, you know. These little ways that we can invite the true meaning back into our lives are one of the things that this pandemic is giving us. By shutting down so much, it makes us focus more on what matters. And what matters mostly is also what's sacred, really, at the end of the day. Yes,
And I
fear is there, but it's pointing us toward what's sacred. It's pointing us toward the numinous.
Yeah, and I think also a little bit of humor. I'm reminded of the movie Stripes, where
Oh,
there,
dude, humor is sacred.
yeah, Bill Murray's sitting there with some guys in his unit, right? And there's one guy in there. He goes, you can do this, you can do this, and you can do this, but if you call me Francis, I'll kill you. And Bill Murray goes, "Lighten up, Francis." And so here's this
Perfect.
real
Yes.
fearful guy, this real guy that's talking about all these things because he's living really in fear and he doesn't want it. But then, but there you go, a little bit of humor, but also lighten up. We don't have to take things so serious like many of us do at times, and
Yeah.
it's easier said than done.
Oh, me too,
It
man. Me
does
too.
take work, but we're going to get through this. When I think of, and I have had that conversation too, Bill, at times, when I think what some humans have been through on this planet, and oh dear me, I had to stay locked up in my home in America, where I've got 6 grocery stores to choose from. They're all open, all within 6 miles. I don't have criminals running around, and there's a lot worse places I could have been locked up. And of course, I really love my wife. Now that could have been different had I not liked her as much as I do. But you know, there's a lot worse places, and I'm not in solitary confinement at San Quentin. So this is not too bad. If it's a major reset and I have to think about some important things in my life and pray a little bit more, and I'll admit I've been out at my prayer circle out there in tears, wondering what the heck's going on. But I'm still here to live another day. And as long as I can talk to guys like you and we can educate people or at least discuss things civilly without trying to create sensationalism, then it's all good. This COVID-19, unfortunately, my heart goes out for anybody that's lost somebody. I'm not taking this lightly at all, but my life could have been a lot worse than it is, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Gratitude is the answer here. Gratitude is one of those great spiritual practices that anybody can do, and it really comes from a place where even if the thing that was done for you is so simple, offering appreciation for that just gets out in front of fear like nothing else. You guys, there's so many studies, there's scientific studies. I actually read a doctoral dissertation on gratitude, and I was thinking to myself, okay, dude, if you got to write a doctoral dissertation on gratitude, it's serious now. I mean, if the scientific community is involved, then gratitude must mean something. The spiritual community has known that for eons, and now we've got science on board. So yeah, if you've got a scary coming your way, find a way to show some appreciation, to say thank you, to be grateful for something, even if that's just within you and you're grateful for the fact you're still alive. You know, do that. And on a macro level, I wish we had one of them in our city where we could lean out the windows and howl, because showing that appreciation in such a visceral way for the people who are on the front lines right now, that's a beautiful way of unpacking your fear and transforming it into something that shows uh, in the sacred world that you really do have a foot in that world too.
Well, I'm going to go back to the song that I mentioned, "Still Got to Serve Somebody" by Bob Dylan. My advice, as these states start to open up, we go to phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3. My advice is this to the listeners out there, friends and fellow veterans, business owners, visionaries, outliers: live your life. live your life, choose a profession that really gets your juices flowing. But just remember, you still have to serve somebody. And I'm not pointing the finger either way. And the lyrics to the song, it may be the Lord or it may be the devil, but you still have to serve somebody. So live your life. Don't live it in fear. Get out there, make things happen. Lean on each other if you have to. This is a fantastic life that we've been blessed with. It could always be a whole hell of a lot worse. And think about who you have to serve. And if it's just a conscience that's for the greater good, then kudos to you. And that's great. And I just am glad that you're alive.
John, as always, I think you've said it so well, man. I can't think of a better way of closing the show than on your words. So, brother, thank you.
Thank you, brother. Aho. Appreciate you, man.
Appreciate you. Until next time.
And thank you for listening, everybody. You know, we got to tell
Thank you for joining us on this episode of AHO Radio. Information we mentioned is probably in the show notes, but if we missed anything, please let us know and we'll get it added for you. Subscribe to the AHO Radio channel on YouTube to stay connected, and as always, we wish you health, success, and significance. AHO!